What's going on, CrossFit Federal Way? It is Tuesday, and today is our heavy day. And if you can't tell looking at the board, it's pretty simple. So all we're doing today is we're going a max effort 50-foot sled push. So we're using the prowler. We're loading absolutely as much weight as we possibly can and pushing that for 50 feet. Now, the way that this works is, well, I mean, there's not a whole lot of warming up or anything else that really has to happen. You'll kind of get warmed up as you go. We might do a little bit of hamstring mobility or something like that and just kind of like make sure things are open and loose, or looser if they are tight from Monday with our complex. This one's going to be outside, and it's going to be all about just going heavy on the sled. Now, the way that this works is you will, once you initiate the motion and that sled starts to move, the sled can't stop. So I can't get 20 feet into my 50 feet, stop and rest, and then push it again. That no longer counts as a 50-foot sled push. I have to do it all unbroken in one go, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategies behind how we push a sled the right way and the wrong way to do it. In fact, there's really multiple right ways and not as many wrong ways, but we'll dive into that a little bit. And when you guys come into the gym on Tuesday, you will see that everyone's going to have kind of their own style or adaptation to try to figure out how they can drive as much power into the sled as possible. But be ready to surprise yourself. The last time that we did a max effort sled push, we had people pushing 1,200 pounds on the sled and things like that. So just be ready. Don't underestimate your ability. This is probably going to be a lot bigger weight, a lot heavier weight than you expect. We'll be ready to disinfect prowlers and things like that, because I imagine that we're going to have some athletes pushing such a heavy weight that we're just not going to be able to have 3-4 prowlers going at one time. It might be 1 or 2 in order to be able to fit as many plates as we need to, and we'll talk about some strategies with that too. So with that, let's talk about how this sled push is going to go. So I have an empty prowler, when we look at pushing, and it's different because we're on a rubber floor inside, we'll be pushing this outside on the asphalt. So depending on where you hit on the asphalt, you might find that it moves easier or it moves a little slower. Because those areas where there's a lot of tar on a hot day, if the sun's out, which fingers crossed that it's out today on Tuesday. Yeah, today, but not today. If the sun's out, sometimes those tarry patches in the asphalt can really slow down your sled, and you just got to grind your way through it. But when we're talking about pushing, a really common thing that you will see happen is athletes will keep their arms extended when they're pushing. And the thing about that, I find if I'm doing a heavy sled push, I might initiate the push being a little bit closer. That way I'm not relying on my strength here. I feel like I can get a little bit better leverage when I'm up close on the plates or on the sled. So the other thing I would think about is I want to grab those handles a little bit higher. I may not have to go all the way at the top, but that's going to drive the front part down into the ground a little bit. Sometimes you'll see athletes get down on a sled push and push really, really low. The reality is the way that we can load a ton of weight onto these sleds, you probably won't be able to grab that low. And while it might give you a leverage advantage in some cases, generally you're not going to be able to get as much power out of your legs in that position. So, biggest thing I want to think about when I'm pushing the sled, when I'm dealing with my legs, is I want short, choppy steps. I want to think about getting my knees as high as I can when I'm pushing. So as I'm pushing the sled, it's not these big, long footsteps. I'm not really taking big steps, especially when it's heavy. I'm going to have short, choppy steps. So imagine that I'm trying to just work on that short, choppy push, especially when it's heavy. I might only get a little bit every step, but I'm keeping my feet moving, and ideally the faster those moving, the more momentum I can keep going on that sled. Now obviously this is empty, so it's easy to just keep it moving, but the biggest thing to think about is just keep your feet moving. If I'm pushing, and let's just say again, if it's 1,200 pounds on the sled and it's moving and it's really slow, the moment that I slow down, trying to regain that momentum is going to get really tricky. So it's about once that momentum's there, I'm just fighting to keep it going and keep breathing. Now, much like, say, a heavy yoke or anything else like that, your breathing pattern isn't going to be normal on a sled. You're not going to come up to it and be able to continue to breathe normal. So you're going to be tight in your midline. Everything's going to be under tension while you're trying to move that weight. So it's going to be short, shallow breaths. And just like when we did the 50-foot yoke carry, what was it, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago? You're gonna find that you're gonna need to just take in a little bit more oxygen, just a tiny shallow breath at a time in order to not lose that tension and not lose that momentum. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, everyone's gonna find their position and where they feel like they get the most leverage on the implement. When we look at loading high weight on these, what we find is we're gonna fill up that central post on this sled pretty fast. So what you can actually do is you can take the handles out of another prowler and put them in the front, so you end up having 4. You fill up the middle, and you can stack weights above that because it's just a push. You're not going to necessarily fall over or anything. But you start by loading your plates on the actual handles of the sled. So that way you've got 5 stacks of plates going on this thing as opposed to just 1 in the middle. So depending on the athlete, for those athletes that we have that are going to be pushing massive amounts of weight, you'll see how it all plays out. But what we'll end up doing is one person's going to push, everyone's going to cheer them on. Then we might have 2 going at the same time, just depends on loading. But they're going to push, everyone's going to cheer them on. When they're done with their 50, they're going to be resting. And you'll want to rest for quite a while when things get really heavy because it is a lot of time under tension. The sled doesn't necessarily move fast. So it's a lot of energy expenditure in a very short period of time. But today's really just about overloading the sled and seeing just how much weight we can push. It should be a nice kind of break, not a break, but to mix things up from what we normally do when you come in and everything's really super structured and it's like, here's your warm up, we're doing this, and the coaches have like, well, I've got this much time to get through these pieces of class to make sure we finish on time before the next class comes in. It'll pretty much be, sleds will be outside, you'll show up to the gym, and we'll go out and just start, we'll talk about strategy, we'll talk about how to do these things, and we'll just start adding weight and see where we end. So it should be a really fun class today while still, simultaneously going heavy. So with that, we don't have to go back to the board and read the board again because it's just a max effort 50-foot sled push. But it should be super fun today, guys. I know that when we get these implements out and we do stuff like this, I know for me as a coach, I have a great time, and we get to watch you guys crush some heavy weight. And hopefully the sun's out and shining so we can actually spend some time outdoors. And let's do it. Let's get after it.